Hello and welcome to today's lecture on our course Blockchain and its applications, and this is lecture number 53 of our course. Today we will continue our discussion on blockchain security. So, the last lecture was the first one on security aspects of blockchain, and today we will delve deep into some of the other types of security risks in blockchain. So, this is the second lecture in the topic which is blockchain security. So, today we are going to cover essentially one particular type of attack which is a very interesting and important attack, which is called selfish mining attack. What we will do is that we will talk about various scenarios that can actually occur when this particular attack is carried out, and we will see that depending on the situation, the attacker can decide to take different actions. Today our keywords are selfish mining. As we mentioned here, the attack itself is called selfish mining attack. So, we will try to understand what is meant by selfish mining. Also, we will see that this attack actually makes an assumption about a pool of computing resources that is available with the attacker. Of course, as we will discuss that other than the attacker, there would also be other miners in this entire blockchain network. So, it is important to keep in mind that it is not only the attacker who will be mining or its pool will be mining, there would be other normal, genuine, good, benign users who are also going to actually keep mining the blocks. So, we will talk about of course, public blockchain, and generally our focus is on Bitcoin. So, as you might have noticed that most of these attacks that we are talking about, they have some connotation that relate to Bitcoin. This is because that this is Bitcoin is the one which is most expensive, if we call it cryptocurrency, and hence always the attackers who try to attack the Bitcoin network. So, one of the keywords that we have is of course the public chain, but this public chain, by that we do not only mean that it is a public blockchain, but as we will see that there will be an attacker's private chain and there will be one which is known to everybody, which will denote as public chain. So, that is one of our keywords, and also we will see that these attackers, what they would do is that they would carry out the attack by suppressing the blocks they have mined. So, that is something very interesting. So, let us look at this particular selfish mining attack, which indeed you will find very interesting. So, first, this attack that we are talking about, we are going to cover most of the material from this particular paper, which was published in the Financial Cryptography Conference in 2014. And that is when a lot of activities were happening, and people were trying to figure out whether Bitcoin indeed is very useful or it has got any kind of vulnerabilities. So, what I would always recommend and encourage you to do is to take a look at the papers that we are referring to from time to time, and this indeed is a very interesting paper. So, I would advise that you please take a look at this paper, and this will supplement your understanding of what we are covering in the class. Also, this paper talks about the scenarios in a lot more detail. We are going to cover the basic ideas here in this lecture, and beyond that, not only this paper, you can search for the selfish mining attack and you will get a lot of other materials on the internet. So, please take a look at those, but this is the paper where they talk in detail about the selfish mining attack. So, coming back to the slides, let me first tell you what this attack is all about, what the attacker does. So, let us assume here that we have a particular status of the chain and say initially we start with this block number 10, which was a public block, everybody knew about it, that this is the latest block. And when I say everybody, we mean that there are these people like others we have shown on the top, and they are the people who are honest users, they are possibly miners, they might also be pulling in their resources to mine the blocks. So, that is perfectly fine with these miners, which we denote as others. On the other hand, so these are others as mentioned here, and on the other hand we have this one on the bottom, which we denote as the mining pool, and that actually belongs to the attackers, as we will see in subsequent slides. So, what we denote in these slides as a mining pool, basically that is the mining pool means the computing power that this attacker has been able to put together. So, that is what we will denote as the mining pool. So, first is understanding what is this others and what is this mining pool. Others as the honest people, mining pool what we denote here, these are the attackers, but of course, these others also include many mining pools. So, let us not be confused in any means that these mining pools of those who are in mining pools are indeed causing some trouble. It is not absolutely like that, but it is the attackers who have formed some mining pool, because they need, the attackers also need to come together and have sufficient amount of computing power. So, that is why we are saying it is a mining pool. So, what is happening if you note, so quick understanding of the icons we have. So, whatever we show here like this type of bold rectangles, this means that these have been published and these are known to everybody. And what we show here as dotted, as you can see, or dashed, these rectangles, they denote that these are there, these have been mined, that but these have not yet been published. So, you understand that or you can think about it like this, that say the latest block in the blockchain was block number 10, and you started mining. So, you yourself can do it. So, you have some computing power, you got some transactions and you started generating a block, and suppose you got this block number 11. So, what your options are there? You have two options. One is that you publish the block 11 and then others will validate it by checking whether the hash indeed is created as per the requirement, the difficulty bits and the nonce is correct, and based on that the others will also be now agreeing to treat that as the most recent block head, that is block number 11 added after block 10, and then people will try to mine after that. So, the new blocks they will try to add after that block 11 and then become block 12, as is shown on the upper set of rectangles. Also, you had this other option that even though you could mine that block number 11, which we did not say as block 11 prime, but you do not make it public. So, you just keep it to yourself, but you could have mined it. And if you know that you have mined it, even though you have not made it public, what you can also do is that you can keep adding subsequent transactions as a block that will refer to this block 11 prime of yours, and you can have this next block which is block 12 prime, but this is private to you, this is not something that has been made public, and likewise block 13 prime and block 14 prime and so on. And that is what the attacker does. Of course, you will wonder that if it is not made public, then the blocks that we are denoting as 11 prime, 12 prime and so on, that will not go as part of the main chain of this blockchain, and hence actually the block reward will not be paid to the people who are keeping it to themselves. Like if I did it or you did it and kept it to yourself, that definitely would not pay you anything, because it is not added to the main chain, and of course, you will not get back that this block reward. But we will see that that is the whole point, that the attackers will be actually using this concept that they can make that they can create the blocks, but still keep them private till the time when they feel that it is worth now publishing it. So, that is what this selfish mining attack is all about. So, it is actually mining selfishly in a way that it will be trying to ensure that the others who are giving honest effort, they initially might find that they are actually adding blocks to the chain, but later on what the attacker will do is that attacker will publish a number of blocks together, and as a result what will happen that attacker's chain will be the longest chain, that is the target of the attacker. And then once that becomes the longest chain, even though initially say 11, 12 and 13 were actually generated by or mined by the honest users, and they initially were forming part of the chain, but later on this attacker mines these 4 blocks 11 prime to 14 prime, and now suddenly together the attacker publishes all these 4 blocks. Then what will happen? This now will have 4 blocks added after block 10, while the existing one will have 3 blocks added after block 10. So, this one will now become the longest chain, and as a result this will supersede what was created by the honest users. So, that is what we will see in the very next slide, that in selfish mining attack, the once it has been generated, then once it will be published by these attackers, this will become the longest chain. So, what is the attacker going to do? So, the attacker is going to pull these resources for intentionally forking the chain and then keeping the discovered blocks private. So, once this block has been mined and the attacker knows that parallelly somebody also has mined a block. So, instead of following that block, attacker will still keep this block to himself without publishing it. So, the attacker has intentionally forked the chain and still keeps the discovered blocks private. Now, the honest nodes, what they will do is that they will continue to mine on the public chain. So, public chain is the one that is known to everybody. Okay. But the pool, by pool means this attacker's pool, keeps on mining on its own private branch till certain conditions are actually met. And what they will do is that if the attacker can discover more blocks, okay, by its own pool, it will develop a longer lead on the public chain, and then it continues to keep these new blocks private. Okay. So, the attacker can keep on using its pool to elongating the chain and keeping it private, and as we will see when the attacker is going to publish its own blocks. So, that is the last point we show here, is that when the public branch approaches the pool's private branch in length. So, the honest people will be adding to the public branch the new blocks, and the selfish miners, they will be adding to their own private block, and then the honest users will not know how many blocks have been actually created and kept private by the attacker, but the attacker knows how many blocks have been made public. Okay. So, what these attackers will do under certain circumstances, they will make their private chains divulge to the public, and then they will try to ensure that they get more revenues. Now, why would these people be doing like this, and what are the certain assumptions in it? First of all, remember that even these, though they are selfish miners, so we of course do not assume that they have more than 50% computing power, because if it was possible, then they would not need to do all these things. So, that would be part of that 51% mining attack that we talked about. But these people, what they have is that they have sufficient computing power, but not really more than 50%. So, they would be able to mine different blocks from time to time, and overall the other people are likely to mine more number of blocks in an overall given amount of time as compared to these ones, the so called selfish miners. So, that is also quite well understood, but by playing with the time when the blocks are divulged to the public by these selfish miners, they are likely to get more revenues. And the point is that if general people, the honest people, even if they say that, oh, there is this pool who is actually adding more to the chain, and then they are generating revenues, and even though if we had earlier mine certain blocks, eventually we are losing out with respect to them, then what will happen? These honest people will start joining that particular pool, and as a result their computing power would be increasing. And finally, they will be even if they do not have more than 50% computing power, they will have a lot of computational power, and they will be getting a bigger share of these blocks mined by their pool as compared to the others. So, what it means is that by initially trying to do this selfish mining, the attackers will end up giving an impression that, hey, you come and join our pool and you will get a better revenue. So, that is the whole goal of the attackers when they carry out this selfish mining. So, let us see that what can happen. So, we consider some initial state and we see what the attackers do, and then what we see in the state after the transition. So, what we see here is that, say initially in the diagram for our understanding is that we have the state that is shown here. So, the initial state is like this, okay, as is shown here, and then the other part is that it is also possible the initial state is the one that is shown here. Okay. So, that is what we mean by OR, but let us first focus on the first state. So, initially what we had, initially there was this latest block which was block number 10. So, the attacker knew about it, the general public also knew about it. So, that is the only part of the public chain, there was no chain of the attacker. Now, of course, the honest people are also trying to mine and the attacker is also trying to mine, and assume that attacker mined a block which is denoted by 11 pool to mean the attacker's pool has mined it. So, which the attacker knows is attaching to block number 10, and the public has not yet been able to add anything to the chain. Had they been able to make one, they would have published it. The same situation, it is only that it was not just one particular node that was there. It might be possible that for example, this 10 and then from that maybe 11 was the public, 11 pub was the public's block which was known to everybody, and attacker by that time had already mined up to 14 pools. So, from 11 pool all the way to 14 pool, these are also with the attacker. But attacker, if you see that these are all being shown with dashed rectangle, means the attacker has not made it public. So, from starting from there, so one condition is starting from this 10 only and the attacker generating 11 pool. The other, this OR that we denote here, it means that the other possibility is the starting state is this one, where attacker had these 11 to 14 already generated, and now attacker has been able to add this 15 pool. So, that is what happens, but still this is one possible scenario. So, we will be showing some 8 possible such scenarios. So, this is the first possible scenario, where if it occurs either from this one it goes to this one, or from this one it goes to this one, the attacker does not do anything, and till attacker makes something public. So, there is no question of attacker getting some revenue out of it. So, what will happen to this revenue will be determined depending on the later stages which we will discuss. So, it only shows that if this was the initial state and attacker gets one additional block, the attacker just does not do anything and keeps it to himself. So, that is what we intend to show in this particular slide. So, now we move on to the next slide, where if you see that the initial state is that there were 2 branches of length 1. So, there was this 11 pub which was known to everybody and this 11 pool which was known only to the attacker. Okay. And then what has happened is that the pool finds a block. So, we are referring to what happens in this is the state that we denote and this is what happens. Okay. So, if you see that this was one such block that the attacker had, and then attacker has mined one more which is 12 pool, and the attacker sees that there is this 11 pub which is there in the public part of the chain. So, what the attacker does is that the attacker's pool, they publish its secret branch of length 2. So, now you see that what we have shown here, this secret branch has been published and this dashed rectangles have been converted into these bold lines. So, that means these have been published. So, whatever has been put in this dark or continuous rectangles, so they denote that it has been published. But as soon as this is published, you see what, that this block, this chain, now it has got a length of 2 and this has got a length of 1, and it means that this is a longer chain, and hence the general public's that 11 pub which was there here before, now it is colored in green, meaning that this is not going to fetch any block generation revenue for the public or whoever had mined that particular block. So, that miner is not going to get the payment because of generating that particular block. So, effectively what happens, the pool obtains a revenue of 2. So, the pool gets this revenue which is there for generating each block, like it is 6.25 bitcoins or whatever it is currently valid, and this particular pool or the attacker will now get the revenue for 2 of the blocks. So, why we are explaining that is that you will then be able to follow when the attacker is going to divulge its chain and try to get the revenue. You might wonder that why did this attacker now actually publish both 11 pool and 12 pool, because the attacker, as I said, that attacker does not have a lot of pool of this computing power. So, attacker might think that, see, if the general public now adds 1 more after 11 pub, and eventually if it becomes more, whatever I have mined this 11 pool and 12 pool, that will go waste. So, in order to get that revenue, what it does is that it publishes this 2 and then it is negating the effect of 11 pub, and this becomes the longest chain, and mind it, everybody now knows about this particular chain. So, everybody will now be trying to add blocks after this 12 pool. So, that is what is going to happen at this stage. Now, look at this one, there were 2 branches of length 1 and others find a block after the pool head. So, you see that this 11 pub and 11 pool were there, okay. And also note that this 11 pool that we show here, this is also with this bold rectangle, meaning that both were made public. So, that means that after 10 the general public had added 11 pub and the attacker had also mined 11 pool and also had made this public. So, now you see that everybody will be trying to mine, and based on who got which one first or got how many of these blocks from their peers, as we had explained before, the miners will either try to mine the next block by adding after 11 pub, or they will be mining to add another block after 11 pool, because they do not know that it is coming from the attackers or something. They see that 2 such blocks were added, there was a fork after 10, 11 pub and 11 pool, whatever the names we give, and then they will be trying to add the next block, some of them after 11 pub and some after 11 pool. Remember, but the attacker will know that I will not try to add after 11 pub. So, attacker will be trying to add after 11 pool, but people will be divided, some of them will be adding after 11 pool, some of them will be adding after 11 pub. And in this example, what we are saying is that if the others find a block after pool head means the attackers this particular block which was 11 pool, and then what will happen, that you see that this, remember that it has been found by others. So, what it means is that those who found others, they will get revenue for this, but now because it has been added after 11 pool and not after this 11 pub, hence the reward for 11 pool will go to the attacker. So, that is what it says, that the pool and the others obtain a revenue of 1 each, the others for the new head which is 12 pub and the pool for its predecessor which is 11 pool. So, now by this time you must have got a feeling of what the attacker is doing, how the attacker is playing with the blocks that it is generating and then divulging it when it feels that it makes sense to divulge and get some revenue. So, now we will continue with the other scenarios that we explained the first few in more detail for your understanding. So, if you see that it is just something very similar to this third scenario, but in this fourth scenario what happened was, although there was already a fork with 11 pub and 11 pull, but then others they got this 12 pub, but that they added after 11 pub. In the previous one they had added after 11 pull, but in this example they added after 11 pub. So, that means that of course, the revenue for 11 pub as well as for 12 pub, that will go to others and the pool will not be able to get anything. So, that is fairly straightforward. Then the other one is even simpler, that the pool could not actually mine a new block. So, there is no private branch, others find a block. So, it means that this was the status, there was no private branch. So, this was the only branch, or that was the current head of the chain, and others found a block, and others found a block means what? They found this 11 pub which was attached to 10. So, it means that the others will get a revenue for this one, which is equivalent for whatever Bitcoin is there for this one block, and now this of course is the head of the chain, and now the pool as well as the others will start mining on this new head. So, that is fairly straightforward. Okay. Now, what we see here is that there was a lead of 1. So, we had this 10, and then the starting scenario was that, as we mentioned here, that there was a lead of 1, as we see here. After 10, this attacker has this 11 pool, but there is nothing yet in the public chain. Okay. So, at this time, so the attacker was having a lead of 1, but then others found a block, and which we show here that this 11 pub was found and it has been added to 10, and of course, the others are not keeping it to themselves. So, they are making it public. So, there are 2 branches of length 1 now. So, the attacker finds that I better now publish my block also. So, that is what we see here, that the attacker's pool has also published its block, and then this the public also is 11 pub, but as soon as attacker publishes it, we have changed the color from blue to green, meaning that now it is not determined whether the 11 pub will be part of the longest chain or 11 pool will be part of the longest chain. So, that revenue that can be received from this situation cannot yet be determined. So, it will depend on what happens next, and those situations are actually handled in the previous scenarios or in the next scenarios. So, what we are doing is that the time when these blocks are published by the attackers, we are trying to see what could happen to the revenue. Also again remember that even in this situation, others will try to add blocks after 11 pub or after 11 pool, because they will be selecting these based on how many of these came as blocks by from its peers for each of the nodes which are trying to mine, which we discussed previously during our basic elements of blockchain. So, the attackers again has got some advantage, meaning the attacker will only be trying to add after 11 pool, but the general public, some of them will be trying to add after 11 pub and some of the after 11 pool. So, if the next one gets added after 11 pool, then attacker will get revenue out of this 11 pool. So, that is what we have already discussed in a previous scenario. Now, we take a situation where there is a lead of 2 and others find a block. So, if you see here, we have a lead of 2 and others find a block. So, here 11 pub was there and lead was 2, means that the attacker knows that I already have 3 with me. Okay. And then what has happened is that the others have found a block. So, after this 11, the others have found a block which is 12. So, the pool, what it does is that it publishes its secret blocks, causing everybody to start mining at the head of the previously private branch. So, when the attacker sees this, attacker will feel that, oh, what would happen is that now if I do not publish it yet, because this is not known at all to anybody. Okay. This is only known to the attacker. So, what the attacker would do is that instead of waiting any further, attacker will immediately go and then it will publish it, and that is shown here that all these 3 are now published. And if you look at this example, those of the public, that was 11 pub and blue pub, which was shown in blue, now that has become green, meaning those are the ones which are not going to generate any revenue, but because 11, 12, 13 pool, that is now part of the longest chain, hence the attacker will be able to get the revenue out of it. Because what will happen is that this 11, 12, 13, this is going to be longer than the chain with 11 pub and 12 pub, and as a result what will happen is that the next block people will try to mine after this block number 13 pool and not after of course block number 12 pub, because they know that this is the one which is the longest chain. So, as you see here, what we have written is that the pool publishes its secret blocks, causing everybody to start mining at the head of the previously private branch. So, that is what is going to now start, and pool obtains a revenue of 2. So, now what happens is that as mentioned, that everybody will start mining at the head of the previously private branch. So, previously private branch was this 13 pool. So, now everybody will try to mine after this. So, with that we covered 7 of the scenarios, and then we have this 8th scenario and the last one, that lead was more than 2 and now others win. So, here we see that the lead was more than 2. So, if we look at this example, that here on the upper side at the starting situation, the lead was more than 2. So, you see that here there was nothing in the public view and attacker had more than 2 leads. So, attacker already had these 3 and the public had only 0. So, attacker had this lead of 3, and now the public could mine one more and made it available for everybody, and which we denote as 11 pub. As soon as it is done, what happens is that the attacker does not reveal all its blocks. So, what the attacker is trying to do is that attacker is trying to frustrate the others who are trying to mine something, spend their resources, spend their money, computing power, electricity and all, and then even after they got 1 or 2, they finally see that they are ending up being losers and that one particular pool is always winning. So, what this attacker is trying to do is that trying to frustrate them and ensure that more and more people from those groups actually join its own group. So, what happens if you see in this situation, the pool now reveals its ith block. So, pool only reveals this one. You see that what we had here, that this was dashed line and this is in bold, means that this has now been made public. So, the attacker actually knows that I still have a cushion of 2 more blocks. So, even if this public can mine one more, then I will make all my blocks public. That is what was shown in the previous example, that was scenario 7. So, what it is doing is that one by one it is making public, and why it is doing that? Because that it is ensuring that the other party that also will not be able to get ahead of the attacker even if it continues mining at the same pace. So, what it does is that it makes it public, and then now you see that it is now a situation where the lead is 2. Now, depending on who does what, it will actually go back to one of the other scenarios. So, it could be either like this one or like one of the other ones that it keeps on adding more. So, we go back to one of those states and it will keep on adding more blocks. So, after this particular scenario number 8, what we have done is that we have covered all the possible scenarios, and as we have seen that the attacker will strategize based on where it sees itself with respect to the public view of the blockchain. So, that is about this selfish mining attack, which is very interesting, and of course, that causes many other people to join these miners group. So, we discussed that in detail, and we have seen how the attacker takes various types of decisions under different condition, and that is the interesting part of this particular attack. And of course, you please refer to the web links that we have given, the paper, and as I mentioned, there are other papers also related to it or other websites. So, you are encouraged to go through those sites from that we have mentioned from time to time, these resources, and that will of course complement whatever we have discussed in the class, and you will get into more of the details in depth of this particular attack. So, that brings us to the end of this particular lecture. Thank you very much for your attention.